Many Naruto fans would agree that when Gaara made his presence felt during the tuning exams, that he made it abundantly clear that anyone who messed around with him was as good as dead. Anyone who proved to be a hindrance to him was likely to be killed, as shown when Gaara very casually killed an entire team during the tuning exams, seemingly enjoying the shower of blood that poured down all around him. However, as many fans know, after his battle with Naruto, Gaara would then go on to turn a new leaf and eventually become the Kazekage of his own village and the future father of Shinki. In today's final installment of the True Power series, the new 5 Kage Edition, we're gonna take a close look at the true power of adult Kazekage Gaara. So starting things off with the obvious, adult Gaara, like his other Kage contemporaries, is actually a lot stronger than a lot of fans like to give him credit for, and during the 15 years between the end of the war arc and the start of the versus Momoshiki arc, Gaara's power and skill has increased drastically. On top of possessing 3 changes in chakra nature, being earth release, wind release, and lightning release, Gaara in the Naruto Shippuden novel that was written by the Boruto author Kodachi also displayed a mastery over magna release as a Kekkei Genkai that Gaara is able to use to boost his offensive and defensive attacks. Now, I don't think that any of us would be shocked to learn that a guy who set the record for finishing in the Forest of Death had managed to make a second change in chakra nature almost as dominant as his Sand Jutsu. In many ways, it does make a lot of sense. Doubling down to strengthen your mastery over one of the other chakra natures that you've learned allows you to be a more dominant and unpredictable force in battle. For Gaara, the obvious answer was for him to beef up his wind release jutsu, since earth release and lightning release aren't necessarily going to go together, which he did at a very respectable rate during the time skip. There are actually quite a few signs that Gaara was destined for something greater than we all expected, and it came all the way back during the war. When you look at Gaara, he was the youngest of the 5 Kage, and while the 5 Kage were ultimately slaughtered by Madara Uchiha, he was also one of those people fighting against Madara, and it does say something that Gaara was able to fight off Edo Tensei Rinnegan Madara Uchiha, who was using wood release at the time, and even after Madara whipped out 5 wood release clones that were all using perfect Susanoo, Gaara still managed to fight back, and he wasn't a hindrance to the other Kage. So again, even if Madara was suppressed and clearly toying around with the other Kages, the fact that Gaara, as the youngest of the bunch, managed to hold his own does deserve some of our respect as fans, because last time I checked, Madara Uchiha was no pushover. By the events of the Boruto movie, in particular in the novelization, Gaara does acknowledge that his taijutsu isn't on par with what you see with Fatigue, Naruto, and Sasuke, or even his other Kage contemporary in Darui. However, Gaara in the fight against Momoshiki does more than hold his own, and even Kinshiki states that Gaara has first-class taijutsu skill, which does show there was a great deal of improvement during the 15 years. This is also true in the anime retelling of the movie as well as in the manga, though there is a good bit of difference that Gaara did get wrecked by Fused Momoshiki in the anime. But even still, going by the statements in the Boruto light novels, where when Momoshiki appeared, the fact that Momoshiki outright stated that he believed he could destroy Kaguya is a hint at the fact that Gaara might have been doing very well against someone who was stronger than Kaguya, which does make you better appreciate, and I can't overstate this enough, this makes you better appreciate how freakishly overpowered Naruto and Sasuke were during the 3 days where the Fourth Shinobi World War raged on. Over the course of 3 days, Naruto and Sasuke ascended to levels of power that were absolutely so insanely high that it took the other 4 future Kages of their generation a full 15 plus years to reach a level of power where they could even hope to be able to be of assistance fighting against the Suzuki clan. The fact that they've trained and they've gotten this strong, we have to tip our hat to a new 5 Kage. Now, the one drawback when it comes to Gaara as an adult is that in the Gaara novel that was also written by Kodachi, which is set before the events of the Boruto movie, we find out that Gaara, while he does have magna release, doesn't use it often in battle for quite a few reasons. One is that mainly he uses it as a last resort to beef up the power of his sand, doing so in a way that isn't super obvious to whoever it is he's fighting, which is actually pretty smart. But the other reason is that based on how I interpreted a few things I read in the novel, Gaara's mastery over it isn't as refined as his normal jutsu, in particular his sand jutsu. It's like going into a brand new performance car. For instance, I used to drive a Hellcat. Now, I wrecked the Hellcat, and when I got the opportunity to drive my boss's Corvette, he's got a C7 Corvette, when I got the opportunity to drive it, I noticed the difference right away because the car's a lot lighter. Even though it had less horsepower than the Hellcat, I still noticed the difference. So I liken it to the performance car by saying that this is true true when it comes to Gaara when it comes to Magnet Release. Gaara can use it, and it's only his last resort to finish off an opponent. If he was refined with the mastery of it, then I believe that he will be more open to using Magnet Release early on in his battle against tough opponents, but given the fact that he holds it as a trump card shows that Gaara is only going to use this jutsu if it's under the right circumstances. Because one of the worst things you can do in battle is use jutsu that you're not completely comfortable with. Due to the nature of Gaara's insane defensive abilities, Gaara can pretty much stand still against most opponents who aren't in that upper tier of power in the Naruto universe. In order to land a hit on Gaara, you either have to be really creative like Deidara or Naruto, or you have to have insanely fast speed like when it comes to Rock Lee and Sasuke when they manage to hit Gaara, or you have to be a walking tank that's a freak of nature like Mamoru Uchiha. However, 15 years of training has seen Gaara's sand defense grow to levels of power that it could be argued, based on the stuff that we've read, that fatigued Sasuke Susanoo is the only thing that rivals it, which is pretty impressive. Though when Sasuke attempted to swallow up an attack that Gaara managed to hold off for a brief moment in the novelization for the Boruto movie, Sasuke wasn't at full power, so take that as you wish, and given the fact that we never really seen Sasuke at full power, you guys can definitely take that as you wish as well. Now, his sand binding jutsu immobilizes the target once he traps them in it, and unless they themselves are stronger than Gaara, they can't break free of the jutsu until Gaara goes full blown out Sasuke and is ultimately out of chakra. Though he's lost the ability to use the sand shuriken jutsu, which is a jutsu that actually cuts through objects that are harder than steel, Gaara has overcome not having the chakra of the One Tails as an adult. In the Gaara Heated novel, he actually debuted his sand sword, which is a sand blade that can cut cleanly through his targets and is able to stretch itself up to 5 meters in length and attack his target and pierce through hard objects like shields. By the events of the Gaara Heated novel, Gaara's sand barrier has become so powerful that when he uses it, he is able to completely crush the person to the extent where no trace of their body, down to their hair fibers or their actual DNA, is left behind. When Gaara catches you in this, nobody's gonna notice you existed in that spot. The jutsu is often performed by first catching them in the sand coffin and then smothering the target with sand from all directions, which by the time that Gaara is an adult, he can actually use his chakra to control the density of the sand to the levels I mentioned earlier. The difference between teenage Gaara, who used this jutsu, and the Gaara that we see now as an adult is that adult Gaara immediately absorbs the blood and DNA of the target upon killing them, whereas when teenage Gaara used it, their blood will usually sprout everywhere like the scene out of a horror movie. His giant sand barrier is a more powerful version of the former attack. When Gaara uses this jutsu, the sand almost comes off like it's quicksand in nature and sucks the target underground and begins to smother them in a much higher density of the previous attack. It's one of the more gruesome deaths that you can die by in the Naruto franchise, in my opinion. Since this jutsu repeatedly crushes every bone in your body repeatedly, non-stop, for as long as Gaara's molding his chakra for the attack. Unless you have some insane Kekkei Genkai like Kimimaro who's able to harden his bones, or you're in a Suzuki level threat like Urashiki, then there's no way in hell you're surviving this attack if Gaara manages to catch you off guard. His sand shield was already really impressive, being able to hold off Amaterasu flames, but as an adult, due to his chakra increasing, as well as his incorporation of using Magna Release into the sand shield, Gaara is able to stop more powerful attacks than he could 15 years ago. Now, the sand shower barrage shoots off bullets of sand in a rapid fire manner, similar to the way that bullets fly out of a Gatling gun that can rip through the bodies of his target. The only thing being shown durable enough to survive this attack is a Susanoo, which again speaks to its raw power. By collecting the sand in the area, Gaara is also able to create a floating eye that Jiraiya would have loved to have had in his possession when he was peeping on women at bathhouses. However, there's something different about Gaara as an adult using his third eye jutsu, and I'll explain to you guys why. So essentially, we all know that the third eye jutsu allows you to spy on your person by basically gathering the sand in the air. The eye floats around and you're able to see everything that they can see. Well, Gaara as an adult, in particular Gaara by the events of the Gaara Heated novel, A Sandstorm Mirage, Gaara can actually increase the amount of chakra he uses for this jutsu, and Gaara can now not only see what's going on, but he can also hear what's going on in the area as well, which makes this the ultimate surveillance tool. And now you guys are starting to see why when Gaara was going on all these S-Rank missions as a child, Gaara was able to essentially do these missions without getting scratched. Now, as an adult, Gaara has also began to focus on his wind release chakra, and the first signs of this are shown in the Naruto The Last novelization when he uses his wind release jutsu to help protect the hidden sand village when the meteor is falling down from the sky, and was supposedly destroys sections of the village, but using a combination of wind release jutsu as well as his sand jutsu, he was able to protect the village. Now, this is where things get a little freaky in my opinion, and what I mean by freaky, I mean very impressive. So you have his wind style breakthrough jutsu, and it starts off by molding chakra in his belly, and then Gaara spits it out through his mouth, spitting out an entire gust of wind that can travel up to 10 meters depending on the volume of chakra. However, if Gaara chooses to increase the volume of his chakra, Gaara can use what's called the wind devastation jutsu, which packs enough power that when it hits its target, it hits it with the destructive force of a hurricane. Now, taking things a step further, when you look at the Gaara Hiden novel, we actually find out that Gaara has a multi-gale jutsu that's able to spit out multiple vacuums of wind chakra at his enemy, or he can use this jutsu to beef up the defense of an ally, or it's used to beef up Gaara's own defensive jutsu. As a final testament to his wind release jutsu, Gaara is also able to use a weaker sealing jutsu when he combines it with the sand bullets. The attack, when it does hit, usually goes into the bloodstream of the target, which allows him for a brief moment of time to use the sand in his chakra to restrict their movement. So while not a full-blown sealing jutsu, it does immobilize his target, which does come in handy if Gaara is fighting from a distance like he usually is and fighting as a part of a team. Now, his sand mesh jutsu is one of my favorites, which basically allows him to create a mesh of sand that allows his allies to use the mesh of sand as footholds as they're fighting against opponents who are able to take flight. But when he's using this jutsu, Gaara is left open for attack because this is a support jutsu. And the reason why I like this one so much is we know that the Suzuki for the most part can fly. So given that we're going to have this Suzuki threat in the future, I like the fact that Gaara has something that will basically allow people who don't have 6-pass chakra to fly or don't have a Susanoo to allow them to fly. Gaara can actually take the battle up to the air by creating this mesh. Now, his sand hail jutsu is used when Gaara forms sand into the form of boulders that begin to drop out of the sky, and they drop onto the enemy, and because of how large they are in size, only the fastest a ninja have any type of hope in avoiding the attacks. Even if the enemy does manage to avoid this attack, the jutsu allows Gaara the time to create a sand clone or create other long-range jutsu in order to attack his enemy from a blind spot because they're too focused on avoiding the boulders. Now, Gaara can also use the sand prison jutsu to capture both flying as well as ground-based targets, though a decent amount of chakra is used for this attack. The sheer speed that the target is surrounded by when this attack is used and encloses them, it does so in a way that's so quick that they don't even realize what happened until it's too late. Now, Gaara confines them in the air in a tight space and crushes them with the sand from all sides. Now, his quicksand waterfall jutsu takes an enormous amount of chakra to perform, and when I say enormous amount of chakra, I'm talking tail beast levels of chakra, and this isn't my assessment, this is actually coming from the Naruto manga. So when Gaara used this attack in the war arc, his own father was shocked that Gaara was able to use this with only his own chakra, and Gaara's father noted that only the power of a Jinchuriki should be able to use this jutsu. As an adult, the sheer volume that Gaara can pump into this attack has increased dramatically since he was able to successfully use this jutsu for a period of time on Urashiki, who was hell-bent on capturing the One-Tails. Now, so when Gaara uses this attack, he basically causes the entire ground to shake and his quicksand rises up to the surface. The force that it initially hits the target with is pretty insane because he's basically hitting them with an entire tsunami of sand. By the time that Gaara finishes the attack, he has the potential to alter the entire landscape depending on the volume of chakra that he's pumping into the jutsu. He can also create giant hands with the sand to capture his enemy or restrain them, and this doesn't have to have the power of a Biju for Gaara to use this attack anymore. And one final thing to take note of is that Gaara's raw power when he uses the desert sand hand jutsu is enough so that it rivals the power of tail beast, which is really important to take note of given the fact that Gaara is no longer a Jinchuriki. Now, his His Imperial Sand Jutsu allows Gaara to seal away his target in a pyramid of sand, but as we saw Urashiki, that shit ain't nothing to be proud of because Urashiki is able to break out of it after meditating for a couple of days. So as you guys can see, there's a reason that Gaara wanted Rock Lee on the battlefield to fight Momoshiki. It isn't because of Lee's taijutsu either. Quite a few of Gaara's attacks are better suited for fighting at a distance and in conjunction with someone who you know can fight at close quarters. A shocking number of his attacks are basically supplementary, so as a question to you guys, how do you think that the adult version of Gaara would do against, say, Edo Tensei Rinnegan Madara? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below, but as always guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Have an awesome day, guys.